I did post the other lectures out there that I've got last night, and probably will get this one posted tonight, but we'll just wait and see. So I got a pile of stuff I'm needing to do and just not getting to. But I did post several things last night. So I believe we are over on page 28. Is that strike call? That's where we left off at. All right. Then let's finish the chapter on out. Not sure how long this will take us. And next week, with us only having one day in here, I think that'll work all right with chapter 2. Yeah, I can show you that stuff through there, yeah. Because it's basic, seeing how to configure the devices. And I think we can pretty well cover that in one day. Be a little bit faster on it, but that'll be okay. So the next thing they talk about in here is they throw you the word converge, and they talk about converged networks. Let me give you a warning about the word converge out there. That you will see that term used two different ways in networking, okay, and in this course, because they're going to talk about it converge, if the network is converged or not, differently later on. At this point, when they're talking about a converged network, that they're talking about that you're doing multiple things across the same network instead of having separate networks out there to do the stuff. Where in the past that you had a computer network there that was just for connecting your computers together. And that's all that went across there was data on the computers. You had a telephone network there that was just telephone stuff. And that obviously goes back 100 years. And then that you could have a broadcast network out there too, where you were watching TV, etc. on the thing, or whatever method on that. So you had lots of different networks in a lot of cases in an organization. And you actually had separate physical wiring, because if you go through this building, you'll see, well, actually not in this building, you go through a lot of buildings, you'll find that you got a whole bunch of set of telephone wire running through the building, and then you got a whole bunch of data cabling running through the building. This building should be completely, because then I don't remember seeing any in it, should be completely just a data network run through it. No telephone wiring running the building, because we're using voice over IP from the time that GNTC started using voice over IP before we designed or built this building. Okay? And so we're doing our telephone through the data network. So we're using voice over IP on it. So we're doing both data and voice over IP on the same network. Now, the other part is, like where they talk about the broadcast networks there, most, if not all of you, realize you can also sit there and watch TV shows or whatever on the internet too. So you don't need to be getting a separate feed on that. And that you're seeing it move more and more towards that direction. Like the cable networks that you're running your data coming across, that you may well be getting your internet through your cable provider, and you're getting data through there, and you're getting your TV signals through that same piece there across that fiber optic or coax cable. The fact of where you're putting these networks together into one network is what they're calling converged networks, that you're converging them into a single network. Does everybody follow on that? So now we're doing the telephones on our actually on our data networks is the way we've done, and that's what we've done on the others. This campus, it was built converged, and so in that case it meant we didn't have to double wire the facility. Even if you were going to wire it for putting landlines in still in an organization, but on correction there's got to be a landline run through this building in any event still, because the fire alarm system has to be connected to a landline on it. Okay? That's still a state requirement on it, that you have to have a landline for that, and probably will stay that way for a good while, so that if the alarm or whatever goes off on it, it gets sent out even if the data's not working. Because I know another place up here in Catoosa County that when they were making a change and were fixing their alarm, that they were required to have to put in a landline in to run to it. So there's a landline connection somewhere, some wire running through to connect to some spots. And usually you've still got a landline coming to your building, but you've got the voice over IP connects to it going out. So you've got to split off on that. So we've gone to converging all of our networks into a single network. And we really have moved towards that, and a lot of places are fully converged on that part. And then a lot of others are still sitting there with not as converged on it. So that's the way it is. And that before, that meant they couldn't talk to each other. Now all of those different things can talk to each other. So what the nice part about being with the voice over IP system that we've got set up here, that if you call and leave a message for me on the Walker campus phone, that it sends it right onto my email. And so wherever I am, I can see those messages. Likewise, that we can actually set the phone number to that it doesn't have to be forwarded between the spots, because I can actually do that I can forward the phone call to a different campus location. But they can also set that phone number up to use at different locations. Mr. Spurlock's phone is actually set up where that number is hitting both this campus and the Walker campus to his two offices. In my case, it's not, so you've got a number for me down here in this office, but I can't check the voicemail off that number because it's used by multiple people, and so they said they couldn't put my number into that phone here because they've got me sharing an office with the adjuncts. So there's others that come in to use it there. So you can do some neat things with the converging on it. Now, the other place you're going to see the word converge, which isn't mentioned in this chapter, but I'm going to throw it at you right now because later on in the book we'll start talking about it, is that when all the devices on a network know about all the other devices on the network, that it's a fully knowledgeable network. Everything knows about everything. It's considered that it's in convergence. Does that make sense? And then when you add a new device to the network, it goes out of convergence until that one is learned by all the others and knows about all the others. Or likewise, if you take a device out, it goes out of convergence also, because now there's a device missing that they think is there, and until all of them realize it's not there, it's out of convergence. And the object is to have your network in convergence. Okay? But that's a case of where we've got a term that's got two definitions sitting in here. Not just like a few things. You're going to have a definition in the real world and a definition in networking. In this case, you've actually got two networking definitions. All right. Then they talk about that you want a reliable network, and they give you a couple of things to deal with in terms of it being a reliable network of things that we look at on it, and about how the network architecture is set up on that reliable network, and what are the things that we need to have it do to meet, as they put it, the user expectations, to be the type network you want it to be. So they throw you 4 terms here in terms of it. First one is fault tolerance. And the internet, the big guy, was originally designed for full fault tolerance. Okay? Everything was connected to everything on it. So then if there was a failure anywhere, if one device failed, didn't affect communications between every other device on the internet. Does that make sense? Now you've not got full tolerance, fault tolerance, but you've got a degree of it. So that you've normally got out of anything on the internet, that there's multiple paths out of there. Okay? So everybody following that? So if one line goes down, stuff keeps on working. However, you've got a number of places that once you get to a certain spot that you may not have it fault tolerant in terms of connections or equipment from a certain point on in. Okay? So it's not fully fault tolerant anymore. And the second thing is, it doesn't have connections to everything from everything. But keep in mind who built the internet originally, and one of their big objectives with it was to make it was the military built it, okay? And the object was that if someplace got taken out, and it was in '69, so if the USSR, or as you see it as Russia now, but the USSR was more than just Russia, that it was a number of other states with it, that if they dropped an atomic bomb on Washington, D.C. or Omaha, Nebraska, that all the other troops and everybody else of the U.S. could still communicate with each other. Okay? As opposed to before, that everything led back into Washington, and if you took out Washington, or if you took out Omaha, and Omaha, I'll use you an example because that's SAC headquarters, and that's where all the bombers are directed out of. Okay, and the ones that are going to drop the atomic bombs for us over there. I got to go in the place back in '72, I think it was, and it was rather neat. It's basically in a hollowed out mountain, and when you go in there, it's just like going into a prison. They warn you when you go in that if something happens, you're going to be locked in there while they're in lockdown until it finishes. So if we'd gone into a national emergency when I walked in there, I would have been stuck in there with everybody else until the national emergency was over. If you go into a prison to work, and I taught at a prison one summer, and that they told me there when I went in each evening that there was possibility always that once I walked through those gates going in, that I wouldn't be able to get out for a week if something happened in the prison and they went into a lockdown, that we'd be all stuck in there until everything got under control. But in there we got to see where they were sitting there monitoring everything going on in the world, and the huge screen on the wall, because that thing must have been at least a story and a half. It was double the height of your wall in here, and huge across there. It was really a ton of screens making it up, obviously, but made it to this huge display, like you see with the Johnson Space Center in Texas, the screen that they're watching as they monitor the spacecraft and everything else. That the same thing there. If any of you've watched the War Games movie, the way they showed it in there, where they were having the problem of when the stuff couldn't be controlled, that was exactly correct on this center on what it looked like. Because when I went to watch the movie and they got into that, and I went, whoa, they got this one exactly right, because I'd been in there. But the object was to keep the communications continually flowing. Not everybody else caught on to that one, because when we did the first Iraqi war and the second Iraqi war, to a little bit less degree, but still the same thing. But the first Iraqi war for sure, back there in 91, I guess it was, when he had taken over Kuwait and we went in and freed Kuwait. But and y'all aren't going to remember on it because that's before your time, but the very first thing they did for several days was they just bombed Baghdad. And when we started the second war back in 2003, we did the same thing. Object being to take out their electrical facilities there in Baghdad and their telecommunications center. And that we were trying to take that out the very first thing. We succeeded very well in the first war. Second one, they'd gotten a little smarter and done a little bit more building in fault tolerance on their system. So they still had a little communications, but the first one, if y'all will go back and look at it, you'll see that there was continuous reports as our troops went through over there, at the coalition's troops going through Kuwait, taking it back, that the Iraqi Revolutionary Army, that they'd come up on them and they'd just surrender to the American and British and etc. troops, because they had no idea in the world what was going on. They hadn't heard from Baghdad in a week or two. And they didn't know what they were supposed to be doing, if Baghdad was still under control by Saddam Hussein, or if he had surrendered the whole country, or what. And they just surrendered because they hadn't had any communications, because when we took out that telecommunications center in Baghdad, that was where all of their communications with their troops all over the country and sitting all over Kuwait after they'd taken it was going through, and they couldn't communicate with them. The internet was built by the U.S. in '69 to prevent that problem, so that you couldn't do that to the United States. Does that make sense to y'all? That there was, which anything that took out, all the other groups would still be in communication. And so you could effectively put up a fight better. So fault tolerance is extremely important. Even within the school one, you really want, ideally, multiple sets of equipment sitting there running it, so that if one switch goes down, that the amount of stuff that goes down when something goes down is very limited, that it doesn't affect a lot of others. And think about how the electrical system's built out there. It's got a fault tolerance built in it now, pretty much. And so when we got a snowstorm, that if the line breaks right on your street, you're out of electricity, okay? But if it breaks a couple of streets on down, they're out, but you probably still got electricity, that unless they hit the major line going into your town. But ideally, there should be a couple of lines coming in, that if it's set up completely correctly, it's just a very small area that has no electricity, because you're feeding in another direction in to a lot of them also, and that you've got a dual feed into it. Does that make sense? So when you build the network, you really want to build multiple. And so if you look at the illustration in figure 124 on page 31, notice those routers. They're fault tolerant. They're designed to handle certain traffic, but if one of them goes down, there's another way around. Now, one or two of them specifically go down, it is going to knock out stuff, okay? If one of the bottom two goes out, it is going to knock out that section of the network, but not the entire thing. If one of the top two goes down, it can get around it, okay? That it just takes a different way. It may not be as fast, your network may not be as fast at that point, but you're working. Does that make sense? And so you want to build that into it. And the better you can do on that, the better. So it's duplicate equipment that's being used, and it's duplicate lines running of another direction to allow yourself to map around another way. Okay? Scalability. That's an important one also. We don't want to build the network so that it works perfect for what we've got right now, that when we need to add some equipment later, that we got to go back and redesign the whole thing. So we want to build our addressing into the whole thing so you can add stuff to it without redesigning the whole thing, that you've got it designed in terms of wiring, etc., that you don't have to redo extensive amounts of that. So you want to build it so that it can expand. Does everybody follow on that one? Because here's one of the things to consider about networking. The devices and all of the things you think you're going to use on the network today is going to be different in 2 years, for sure in 5 years. There's going to be some more things. I don't know what we're going to be connecting necessarily, but there are going to be more things we're going to want to connect to that network in a few more years. And you want to have it designed to handle that. Okay? Quality of service. That is, how good a service are you getting? Okay? Is it able to give you the throughput that you want? Is it producing, when you saturate it, is it producing the requirements that's needed there? So that's quality of service, and we're going to talk some more on that later on. And then the last thing they mention is you want it to be a secure network. And depending on what you've got on the network depends on how secure do you need it to be. Okay? And so you want to set it up for, and so you may have parts of the network that requires a login, and you may have other parts of the network that don't. So that your web server is generally set off into an area where it's fully accessible. Okay? Because you want the public to be able to get into that. But then the other stuff you're going to set in a different section of the network where you got to be able to do logins and such to get to it. And that you can extra protect it on that. They mentioned there, they show you the triangle that you look at all the time on it, which is a CIA triangle. And that one be fully aware of as we go further through the course. One is you're really concerned with confidentiality. Make sure data that should be, that other people shouldn't see, isn't seen by anybody but who should see it. Okay? Integrity. That the data is really correct. Is the information still out there, that it is the data that we put out there, that nothing's happened to it? Y'all want my GNTC/banner to have good integrity, because you want the grade that's showing out there for you in a class to be the grade that you earned. So that you don't want Joe Blow down on the street down there be able to go in and go, ooh, I don't like him, and change your grade that you made an A in your networking class to an F. Now, if he goes in and change your F to an A, you probably aren't going to complain on that one too much. But you for sure don't want him to change it the other way around. So integrity is important. And then availability is the data, when we need the data to be available, that it should be available. Monday was a case of availability wasn't working right, which was the reason I extended your assignment. Because Blackboard, contents of Blackboard was not available to you the whole day. Could have been if you logged on early in the morning before they started goofing with it and didn't log off. That it didn't ever drop you off on it. So it was available for some all day. But as y'all remember, when I came in here and went to take attendance, Blackboard was not available to me. It didn't meet that third part of that triangle. Okay? The information was still, the integrity was still met out there. Confidentiality was met extra on it at that point, because nobody could get into it to goof with it, but availability wasn't met. And so Blackboard was not usable to me at that point and was worthless. Okay? Because you remember what we had to do for attendance. They all had to sign a piece of paper and pass around, and we did it the old-fashioned way. Then they talk about network trends and tell you some things that are new things coming on as they define it. And there's different other things occurring also. They mentioned first, bring your own device, BYOD. You'll see that one quite often out there. think it's CYOD, if I'm remembering right, is another one you'll see sometimes, which is choose your own device, if I'm remembering correctly. And that's where an organization supplies you with devices that you can use, that will give you a phone to use or whatever, but let you choose from a couple of different phones to take with you and that you use or whatever, okay? And you'll see a number of different of these YOD ones there, so, but they mention to you about BYOD and where you bring your own. And instead of you using, like here at school, there are actually some schools where you would come in and just bring your laptop and work off your laptop here at school, okay? And then there's some others that it's choose your own, and that you've seen some school systems around here even with it, where they check you out a laptop to take home with you and such. And so then you're on the opposite of BYOD, you're choose your own device for it on it, that they've supplied you with a device. Online collaboration, you're seeing more of that, and that's out there where people work together using the internet as their connection to connect together and work on projects, etc. together, and a lot of collaboration type things. Video communication is out there also, so that not just voice over IP, but where you can have the conferences, etc. Or in my online classes, I'm doing collaborate sessions, which is what Blackboard has out there for the video communications, and that I meet with all of those classes an hour a week to where they can sit there and watch me. The ones that are taking the online of this class at 2 o'clock today are going to be in a collaborate session with me, and then they can ask me questions and I can give them some information. I try to put notes out there for them, which goes in y'all's class too, telling them things, but sometimes you don't get as much there. And the other part is y'all can ask something here in class to me and that I can answer, versus them, yeah, they can send me an email on it, but I may not catch something quite as quickly on it. And with the live video communication session on it, they can ask the question in the session with me, and we can get more information spread out that way. And you're in the 2601, 2 of y'all, right? And did either of y'all do the session yesterday? And so, like, there was a couple of things cleared up on where there were some problems on trying to do the virtual machine in there and stuff, of when between what I answered back to them and then a couple of classmates. And about half y'all's class, better than half y'all's class, participated. I had like 4 in the afternoon session and 7 people last night. I was surprised when we had 7. That's the biggest I've had attend a collaborate session. It's usually only a handful in the classes last fall, and then that's the second class I've done this semester. And like I say, I'm doing 3rd one this afternoon, 4th one tonight, I believe it is. Yeah. And then I'm going to set it up. Cloud computing is the big thing and the big word out there right now. And they mentioned there's several different ones on that. Private clouds is where we have the data still at our organization, but we've centralized it and we're sharing it out within our organization or even further out into the world, but we're keeping control of it. Okay? So it's cloud-based stuff for a specific private organization. You could do it with an outside cloud provider, but usually with the private cloud you're doing it with your own, and that you're still doing on that. So they sort of mix things over there. Public cloud is where you're using some cloud provider on the internet to keep your data and your programs and service, etc. out there. That's the place where you hear mostly about the cloud. That's the Amazon Web Services, the Azure, I can't remember what Google calls their cloud service, but Azure and AWS are the 2 biggest ones, and then Google's in there. Oracle's got a cloud service. IBM's got a cloud service through Red Hat now that they're trying to grow. But AWS and Azure, AWS is the biggest one by a long shot, and then Azure falls next, which is Microsoft's. Hybrid clouds is where you combine the 2 together there. Now you've also got some public clouds that are smaller, specialized ones, I use Shutterfly for my pictures, and that's a cloud service actually, where they have a cloud service, and they may be doing it on AWS now, I'm not sure. When you go in your Cisco class materials, Cisco's actually using AWS to host all of your stuff of Netacad. Netacad's actually sitting on AWS. Okay? That they used to do it as a private cloud, that Cisco completely did it themselves, and that's a cloud because it's out there for all these different places coming in, getting to it. But now they've gone to where they're using AWS to do it. Palo Alto, for if any of you are in the firewall class, Palo Alto is using AWS to host their stuff. And then custom clouds is where you can design things for specific industry, specific needs, which is really what we were just talking about with the Cisco Netacad. That's a custom cloud, but it's running on a public cloud. Shutterfly, I've got probably hundreds of thousands of pictures out there now, over 100,000 pictures sitting on their cloud service. They told me 20 years ago when they started up that they were going to provide free storage for pictures out there and that you had unlimited storage. I've taken them up on unlimited storage now. Videos, I did have for videos out there for a little bit of time, but they charged for that and I dropped that. Where's the place, where would be a cloud place to put videos? They'll all use it, I'm quite sure. Huh? YouTube. And that's where I'm putting y'all's video, where I'm putting these lectures, is I'm sticking them on YouTube. And that's a cloud service, okay? And that's one of Google's cloud service. That's a custom cloud in that case because it's just for videos, okay? It's not for anything and everything, but it is a cloud. Does it make sense to everybody? All right. Then they talk about some technologies in the home and these really aren't just home with a couple of things they mention here. And one they mention about it's going out into the cloud, and then they mention where we're interconnecting all our different devices. Your cars are getting more and more connected onto through the network, through a cloud or wherever on it. You obviously got all these devices in the house that can be connected on it, and that can connect through Alexa or the other ones like that, and I can't remember the names of them at the moment, to control things, or use it through your phone to control on it. And then they mention about some new ways of doing on that. It's interesting, they've got this in the section of networking technologies for the home, and then they talk about power line networking and give you a big illustration of this big manufacturing plant using power line technology in the home section. Don't think they stopped and thought about what they did right there on that. But with power line networking, and that's one that's coming along further, is that is a case of where you're using electrical wiring for your network wiring. So it's actually taking convergence a step further. Does everybody follow on that one? And you're seeing that occur out there too. And you're seeing the electrical services for a number of years now. I remember when they put it in down there in South Georgia back in 2002, 2003, somewhere in there, where they've got the ability to read your meter from their office through the electrical line now, instead of having to send somebody out to read the meter. Also means, where we were talking about just a little bit ago, if you lose power in an area, it's continuously sending signals back to the central office off the power line, not a separate line or anything running on it. They're just doing it through your power line, and that they know when a break occurs and know where it occurred, or approximately where. They know to one of where their meters or another box is that's transmitting back where it is good to, and then they're not getting anything from beyond that spot. So they can do a quicker response to repair your electrical service. Likewise, with power line networking, that's just taking it a step further, that you can actually send network signals, regular network signals, and do your data networking right there across the electrical line. You can also do the opposite. You've now gotten, they don't throw that one in here from what I remember, they don't, is that you've also got power over Ethernet. You've got low powered devices that don't have electrical lines run to them. They're getting their power through their Ethernet connection. Or they're even, in some cases, getting it wireless. The power can get sent to a low powered device wirelessly. Does that make sense? Which is really weird, the wireless one. Because that also means we got the electricity going through us as it's trying to get there. And then talk about wireless broadband. That is a big one coming on now. That is going to be particularly helpful in our area for some people that have had to stay with dial-up till now. That as you go to the wireless broadband, that it will be sending out signals in a smaller area and be able to get to places that could not get broadband before. And so that one is starting to catch on and being out there, also being used in cities, etc. But it requires a lot of additional tower type stuff to it, which is the same thing that we're getting into 5G of an issue, and that we are actually combining on that. And so that you can do the two. Network security, they mention on that about security threats. And they throw you about a number of different threats to networks. At this point, you really don't need to worry about the different ones on that, but we'll mention a little bit more on that later on, but not a lot in this course. That's what your 1601 class is doing. That's what the 2601 that a couple of y'all are in is doing, is into all of that, and that gets into some other places. That they talk about there's lots of external threats to networks, but those can be internal threats also. Because if you've decided you're going to quit the school next week or quit your job next week, you may come in and plant something in there because you've been mad at that place you worked at, that you didn't like them at all, but you hung on there. And now you just got offered a new job, so you're going to leave next week. So you go and plant something in there in their network that next week after you're gone will take off. So you put a Trojan horse on there to activate sometime next week and wipe out their whole network, or plant some ransomware on there to make them then have to pay you a huge amount of ransom to get their network back. Not to say that you would do that, but I just picked you as an example because I don't know if you would or wouldn't. I assume you wouldn't.
That seems like too much effort.
Huh?
That seems like too much effort.
We were reading stuff yesterday. I was reading someplace on the return on how much money some of these different phishing efforts, or the ransomware ones, the ransomware people that hit Atlanta and a number of hospitals and several other cities across the country and stuff. They indicted 2 Iranians for it in December, and they said on the attacks they made in 6 months last year, they collected something like $40 million in Bitcoin. You know where you get these pop-ups on your screen sometimes that says you've got a problem with your computer, call, and it usually sounds like it's Microsoft on it. Call this 800 number and we'll help you get it fixed. And that hopefully all of y'all are smart enough that you just close that and just keep on going and ignore it, because they really don't know if there's anything wrong with your machine or not. And actually sometimes they do it by phone call also, which is rather funny. Sometimes they call people that don't even have a computer and tell them there's a problem with their computer. Obviously there's not a problem with their computer. That, they said, in 2 to 4 weeks, those people, and they're usually calling to a place in India, they said about 10% of people that get that screen actually call the number, and about 6% actually pay the money for the repair of something that's not even wrong on their machine, netting those people about $10 million every 2 months. Amazing and they can buy these programs on the dark web for anywhere from $15 to $50. That's a pretty good return. But those 2 Iranians, they can't travel anywhere out of Iran now. because the U.S. has got that indictment on them, but we'll never catch them because Iran's not going to turn them over to us. And apparently they weren't even connected with the government on it over there. They just did it on their own, that they were doing that stuff. But they have figured them out and indicted them. The ones doing the other, in December, Microsoft with the FBI and the Indian security services did 10 different raids on places in India and arrested a whole bunch of people on that one, doing that. So you probably won't see that one pop up as much on your machines now. But just to give you an idea on it. So they mention about ways to protect yourself against the security threats. Antivirus and anti-spyware are very important ones to always have on your system. So you'll find plenty of people that don't have, either A, don't have it on there, or it's grossly out of date. They don't keep it up to date. Okay? And there's a lot of good, both products. Now I will tell you this, that most of your anti-spyware products do claim they're most of your antivirus products will claim they protect you against spyware also, but they really don't do real well on that. Okay, so my suggestion to you is run both. Personally, I'm using Avast and Super Anti-Spyware for the last couple of years. I used to use AVG, and I used Norton for a number of years before that. Norton really did some neat things for me. Now, Norton has occasionally come out with a bad product that ate up memory, etc. on it. But they protected me a couple of times on a couple of major outbreaks of things that I saw. McAfee did not protect those couple of times where it was on either on the same machine or on another machine and let it go right on through. I watched an entire Athens Tech network. Everybody there, when I Love You came out back in '99, I think it was, which would erase all of the pictures on your computer. I watched that go through that day and wipe out everybody else. And on my machine, and they all had McAfee running on it, so that's what school put on there. I had Norton running on mine also. Norton told me that morning when the email came in that it didn't know what the attachment was, but it looked awful suspicious to it, and it quarantined it. And stopped me from getting attacked. McAfee never even said anything about it. And then later that morning, they cut us off the internet for a couple hours there because of it. But when they put us back on, that Norton sent out an update, and then Norton told me what it was. But their software actually saw it, knew it didn't look good, and blocked it early. And then later on, when they did know what it was and put the signature in their database, it caught it. So those are the two that I'm currently using, but I could change at any point if I find something else better. I've been on them both for several years now, and usually after a few years something else appears better. But those two have still, right now, stayed top for me. Y'all may be using something different, and occasionally I get somebody that really likes McAfee, but I've just never have been impressed with it from all the way back to its beginnings, back in the 90s. They just never had the depth to it to me. A lot of the others, AVG still seems to be a very good one, but not quite as good to me as Avast was. Norton is still a good one, but the problem with Norton is you can only buy it. Although y'all can get given it by some of the different ISPs, will give you a copy of it. The last I knew, I haven't looked, and I'm still on Comcast, but I haven't looked in a year or so, that Comcast had it available to you for free. And then there's one that you're seeing ads for all over the place that I have never heard from before. Secure Lock or something, y'all know what I'm talking about? It's got a green ad box popping up everywhere. You know the one I'm talking about. And I went out and looked at it, and they don't give you any information there. It's something that you got to buy, but they don't give you prices on it. They want you to get their 30-day trial on it, and are claiming it's so much better and everything else. I can't find any real information on it. It's looking questionable to me of what in the world is going on there. But they're running ads all over the place, because I'm seeing them pop up on everything. Apparently they just got some venture funding that they had plenty of money to go advertise themselves now. That a secure lock or something like that it was a different name to it. And when I went and looked, they really didn't give a whole lot of information either. They're aiming it for people that don't know anything. It sounds like, but they really seem like the other. Firewall, have your firewall on your machine and enable it. On your Windows machines, the Windows Defender firewall, I think they're calling it Defender currently, is a good basic firewall. Now, Defender antivirus software, I haven't ever seen it catch anything, has been my concern. Others have told me they see it catch some stuff occasionally. But I've never, and it runs on my machines because Windows wants it to run by default on there. But I've never seen it do anything. So I'm not real sure about that one. And you can get dedicated firewalls out there also. Palo Alto, that's what their business is that they build firewalls, expensive firewalls. And that they are the big one on that. Then they talk about network architecture as the last thing, the Cisco one that they mentioned that they've got a setup for it to put all of this stuff together. And then they mention about their levels of certification. CCENT is their bottom one, which corresponds to your first 2 Cisco classes. CCNA, which is their Cisco Certified Network Associate, corresponds to the 4 Cisco courses we do. I had that back in 2001 to 2004. Each of those is only good for 3 years. I've never taken CCENT, but I'd like to at some point, but just haven't gotten around to doing some study to get some practice tests and try on some stuff before I go take it. You do get a practice test in the second Cisco course for it. And then they got CCNP, which goes the next level up. I have done the first course on that, but I never did the other 3. But Cisco has now approved me to teach all 4 CCNP courses. I'm not sure how I got that approval, but they gave me approval a few months ago to teach a bunch of stuff they didn't used to. And a lot of other people didn't get it, so I'm not sure what I did. Well, I took this cyber ops course last summer to teach it, and I think that set me, because I took a supposedly even a higher level course, that put me in there to do. CCIE, which is Cisco Certified Internet Expert, I think is what it is. Internet networking expert. As far as I've always known, it's their top level 1. It requires you to go to San Jose or Raleigh, North Carolina and do an 8-hour lab where you're setting up this extensive, huge lab that you do as demonstration of all day, and it has to all get to doing before you get through with it. There's only 200,000 CCIEs in the world, if I remember right, or somewhere around there. According to what they say, if you get a CCIE, you can pick where you want to go work, and that they're going to pay you $200,000 or more to work for them. Okay? But it's also got a written part where you have to go through and take a multiple choice exam type thing. That's not supposed to be easy also, and you have to pass both things. I've never gotten either of those. And architect, I don't know about any certifications up on that level. I've really not ever heard of anything above the IE, but they're showing it here as there's architect. Now, on each of those, there's some specialized ones that run off of them. CCNA has a wireless one, has the cyber ops one that there in 2601 is what y'all are actually preparing for the exam in that course. And has a security one that I took the course on that, and it was a killer of a course, and I didn't get it finished. It had 4-hour labs in it that you had to do in every chapter, and finding 4 hours for me to work on a lab is not easy, and to do that for 14 weeks. And doing 4-hour and sometimes multiple 4-hour labs in a week. After about halfway through, I just wore out. While still doing the regular job I'm doing here, that it was one semester that I took that. I think I could probably do now because they're using Packet Tracer and I could do part of it and come back, but trying to find that amount of time was not. And then they up and approved me to teach it anyway, so now I don't really need to take the course because I was taking the course to be able to teach it, and now I'm qualified to teach it anyway. That there is chapter 1 that we have just done in an hour's time, the last part of it. Questions on all of that? So by Tuesday night, correction. Monday no class because we got a holiday. So your test is due on Tuesday night. Chapter 1 test. Okay. It is activated out there. I thought I had activated it middle of last week, but apparently I didn't do the 2451 classes. That when I activated the 26011 one, for some reason in my mind I thought I did everything, or else they lost my activations. So I activated it the other night because I had a student in the online class wrote and said it's not activated. If you get a message when you go take a test that says about it needs activating, it means you need to contact me because I got to go out and activate the test. The tests are all out there, but they got to be activated before y'all can take them. So I'll activate them along the way. Quizzes are already all activated for you. So if you want to do any of the quizzes, which don't count in your grade, welcome to. There's 10 questions on those, and that'll give you a little bit of practice. In the cyber ops class, I can't tell you in this one because I haven't done one of the quizzes recently in here, but in the cyber ops class, the questions were similar. Okay, so if you're in the cyber ops, I definitely do the quiz before I did the test. Okay, because that gives you a little bit of preview. It used to be in this one that the quiz was not quite as deep as the test, but they may, when we came to the new version of the book, they may have written better questions for the quizzes. Does that make sense? Should be somewhere around 25 questions on the test, but that's usually takes cyber ops. Instead of being 25 questions, which is what they tell you it's going to be about, they didn't get close. 16 questions is what's on that first test. Okay? The ones that have taken it said, that have commented to me in the sessions yesterday, said it's an easy test. That it wasn't difficult. Know the 3 tiers in there. Okay? And then in
Does the test have a time limit?
Yes. You've got 30 minutes to do the test in, which is based on that it's got 25 questions. So usually though, I found in this class, usually they run about 22, 23 questions. Now, the other part is sometimes there's a question on there that's not even going to count against you because they will put questions out there and test them first before they make them live and then see how well students do on the test questions. And so sometimes on your test you've got questions, you may get a question and go, I'm not sure what in the world it's about, and then discover afterwards that you could gone on, knew everything else and go, well, I got 100 on it. Well, it may not have counted on it. Okay? The test scores can go up later sometimes, I will tell you that if they discover there's a problem with a test question, they will go back and automatically rescore all the people that have taken tests with that question on it. So sometimes you may, it's very, very seldom that ever occurs, but I have seen it occur where students all of a sudden came in and everybody in the class was commenting, test score out there is not what it was. My test score just went up 4 points. What happened? Well, in that case, if everybody in the class all of a sudden score went up, they just threw out a question. Okay? They realized they had an invalid question. The cyber security, the cyber ops class, when I did it last summer, I wrote them and told them on several questions, and they wrote me back and agreed with me on a couple of them, that there was a problem with the question. They said they were going to remove or rewrite the question. Because I told them, y'all got a problem on this thing. Either they had 2 correct answers on the question, and you had to choose one, or there was no correct answer, or something just was worded badly, and that trying to figure it out was not what it should have been. All right, any questions on chapter 1? Chapter 2, we'll get on into actually setting up some equipment and seeing how to do a basic config on it. So you'll get on that. I'm going to hopefully set up for you this afternoon, maybe tonight, that I'm going to set a packet tracer class for y'all that I want y'all to go through. It's only, need to go through and read each of the chapters. There are like 8 chapters. There's no there's labs in it, but I'm not assigning labs for you to do. And I think the only thing you really have to do is do the course feedback at the end of it. And then you'll get, but it will show you a lot of stuff about packet tracer. Have either of you done the packet tracer class in the other one? Or the two of you? Huh?
We're planning on doing some of it tonight.
Now, the two of y'all, when I put it in there for this class, that you're doing it in 2601, just send me a note at that point saying I have done it. It will count as a lab for you, but I'm not looking for you to get it all done immediately. Okay, but I definitely want you to go through the first couple of chapters because it shows you a lot on what you're doing with packet tracer to start with, okay? And then the later chapters, and they're not real long either, that they're showing you what a lot of other things you can do with packet tracer. Because there's a lot of things you can do beyond just setting up servers and routers in it. That you can do all kinds of other neat little things. There's some fun stuff you can do with it. Saturday, when I was doing the cybersecurity competition in Dalton that the high school students were doing, they had to turn on and off motion and activate some motion detectors for streetlights and get the streetlights to work correctly on city. That in packet tracer. So you can do all kinds of other stuff beyond just routers and switches. There's all kinds of other things can be done. When I did Internet of Things last summer class, we did in there that we were controlling fans in it and everything else. You could set your ceiling fan to have a thermostat in there, and then put a control on in the room where you could warm or cool the room and watch the fan come on and turn off as it got warmer or cooler, and all kinds of neat things. Or turn on the irrigation system if it didn't rain today. And you do have irrigation systems out there, and even the commercial irrigation systems that are now set that way. If you haven't had a certain amount of rain a certain number of days, the system works. But if it's been raining like we've had for the last few weeks, then you don't drive by and see that irrigation system running in the rainstorm, because that always looks strange, right? When you see, particularly these ones doing the crops out there, and it just are running, pumping all that water on there, and it's pouring down rain. And that they can now, with Internet of Things and with what we talked about in this chapter, set it up where it's got a rain gauge somewhere and determines that, and either runs the irrigation or not, and we don't waste water then. All right, then if there's no other questions, that'll do it for today, and then I'll work on help him with his computer.